Parks.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Environment and Water. I refer to the Minister's answer yesterday, which failed to rule out the government requiring farmers to undertake mandatory cultural heritage surveys. Has the government undertaken modelling on the cost for farming businesses of mandatory obligations like cultural surveys?
The call to the Minister for the Environment and Water.
I want to thank the member for his question, and what his question today and yesterday's question referred to are some provisions in Western Australian law. Now, can I be very clear? We are the Commonwealth Government and we're not proposing to adopt Western Australian law.
Order. The 20 seconds in, I'm just going to ask the Minister to pause, and I'll hear from the Leader of the Nationals.
To speak on relevance, the question went clearly to the question that was asked yesterday that went to the federal proposed legislation, not Western Australia's. So the Minister is not even close to being relevant to the question that has been asked today or yesterday.
Order. Members on my right. There's far too much noise for me to even hear the Minister. Just going to bring her back to the question, and she has the call.
Well, in that case, it's difficult to understand what the member's referring to, because what he's referring to is in the Western Australian legislation. But let's take a step back here to look at why this heritage reform legislation is necessary. This is something that came out of the destruction of Juukan Gorge, a 46,000-year-old sacred site. At the time, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition has just said that this did come out of the West Australian Government, whereas the Leader of the National Party has said this has nothing to do with Western Australian legislation. I'm not clear.
The Leader of the Nationals will cease interjecting, the Minister for Home Affairs will cease interjecting, and the member for McEwen will cease interjecting. Just everyone, I want to hear from the Minister for the Environment to hear her answer to the question of the member for Parks.
Mr Speaker, they sit next to each other and they can't even get their questions straight. It's bizarre. It's no wonder they're in such trouble. But you know what? I don't often say this, but I do agree with the now Deputy Leader of the Opposition when she said, and I quote, "Indigenous heritage protection remains an all-too complex interaction of state, territory and Commonwealth law, and it needs to be addressed through a national conversation." She said, "This is about the government working with Indigenous Australians and recognising their right to determine what's important to them." I support the process she put in train. I support the fact she contracted the First Nations Heritage Protection Alliance to develop work in this area. I support the fact that she put $11 million on the table in May before the election to do this work. Can I also say that the work that the member for Leichhardt did in chairing the two inquiries that came out of the Juukan Gorge tragedy,
the member for Barker and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
The work that came out of the Juukan Gorge inquiries led so successfully by the member for Leichhardt when he described that there are, and I quote, serious deficiencies in cultural heritage laws. He said it became apparent to the committee that the legislation designed to protect cultural heritage has in many, many cases directly contributed to the damage and destruction. He said it's time for the legislative frameworks in Australia, in all Australian jurisdictions, to be modernised, to bring meaningful protection to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural heritage. Mr Deputy Speaker—
Order. The Minister's time has concluded.